right. Well, I think we're a few minutes into the hour, so we can just dive right in. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to wherever you're joining us from today. My name is Natita Nivasananda. I'm the Senior Program Associate at the Governance Action Hub at Results for Development, and welcome to our second session of our Global Masterclass, Democratic Public Leadership for Policy Reform. For those who don't know us, the Governance Action Hub is a governance lab focused on exploring ways to enhance collaboration and inclusion in tackling governance challenges to make sure that not only solutions work, but they also last. We believe in the power of networks to inform and inspire institutional action on both local and global challenges. If you'd like to learn more about our work, head over to governanceactionhub.org and follow us on social media to stay connected and get involved in our network. So before we get started, we'd love for this to be as interactive as possible, so please make use of the chat and the Q&A features throughout the session. We'll have a few moments dedicated to your questions along the way. I see some familiar faces reconnecting and also some new participants joining us for the first time. So if you can take a few moments to introduce yourself in the chat by sharing your name, where you're from, and an emoji that captures how you're feeling today, that would be a great start. And just a few quick announcements before we dive in. Participants who attend all 6 sessions will have the chance to win a one-on-one coaching with Julio. Winners will be announced in early December. And due to popular demand, we're also offering course certification for those who attend at least 4 of the 6 live sessions and complete a short quiz. There will be more details to come, so definitely stay tuned. And lastly, each session is recorded and uploaded to our masterclass webpage, where you can also catch up on our first session and all the sessions afterwards. I know you're all probably very eager to get started, so we can just dive right in. Please join me in welcoming our instructor, Julio Guzman. Julio, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Natida. I'm going to share my screen first to be sure that everyone is seeing the presentation. Do you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. And thank you again for being here and to share with us this experience, which is extremely relevant. And indeed, it's maybe the purpose of our lives. I'm sure that you are here because you want to do something for your country, for your community, and even for the world. And one of the things that I was talking to Mario several times is that it's just incredible how colleges, universities, and public policy schools, they don't teach these things. I am an economist by training. I had a master's in public policy in Georgetown. I have a PhD in public policy and other kind of things in terms of academic training, but I never knew the kind of experience that I want to be exposed once I was in government. When I get into the government, it was a completely new world. It was a completely different universe that has very little to do with the things that I learned in school. And one of the reasons that I believe there is a gap between what is taught in colleges and what we learn in government is that dealing in government, more than dealing with technical issues, is dealing with human beings. And that is something that you learn when you are there. So this idea of the Governance Action Hub to share experiences from people that have been in different positions is an amazing idea, because there is no other way to learn about these things. The only way is through experience, the only way is through pain, through making mistakes, and to be able to learn and to be humble enough to understand the things that you did well and the things that you didn't. So I just wanted to emphasize that, because other thing that I experienced when I was in government, in different positions in government, is that the bad guys are very good to coordinate and cooperate among them. But the good guys, we are so bad in getting together and to work together for the same purpose, and we don't used to do that. So spaces like this one, in which a community of good people want to do something really relevant for our society, it's something that is not common. And I believe we need to take advantage of these opportunities. I really want to do that. It's not going to be possible that everything that I share with you, you're going to apply it. Why? Well, because human beings only learn when they go through the experiences by themselves. But at least the sharing of the things that I learn are going to put you with anticipation, exposing to the potential risks that you're going to have. It doesn't matter if my experience is from Peru or Washington, D.C. It doesn't matter because policy reform has the very same format across areas, across countries, because as I said, we are dealing with human beings. So before starting the second session that has to do with the idea that you have that you can transform into a policy design, I would like to just wrap up on the structure of the workshop. The workshop, it's about dealing with policy reform. What we can do to change things when we are in the government. This idea that we already have to make social justice and to make things better. How can we do that, but hands-on, in reality, not from the books, but how can I deal with things when I am within the government? So in order to do that, I identify 6 sessions or 6 areas that is important to discuss. The first one is who we are as a person. We need to know us themselves. What are our motivations? What are our purposes? What are we confronting in terms of reform? So the first session is about that. Is what is public leadership? And why public leadership is so different than other kinds of leadership? And why social justice, unfortunately, it's only achieved through institutions and within the government, and understand what reform is. The second session is about your idea. This idea that has been on your head all over and over and over through the years, and you want to do something, well, that idea needs to be transformed in a policy proposal. So we need to discuss that. What is the best way of design a policy proposal? The third session, it's how to communicate it. Because you can be a very passionate person, and also you can have a great idea that you transform in a very technical, sound policy design. But if you are not able to communicate it, you're done. Because the only way you're going to convince people and influence people if you create stories, if you create narratives for people to get your idea. So communicating is very important. That is going to be the third session. We're going to discuss methodologies, cases, and ways of getting to that. The other thing is, once you are passionate, once you have your idea, now you have the story to communicate, well, there is another big obstacle, which is dealing with the government. How are the rules of the government and how to navigate in the government in the systems and the limitations and the budgeting and everything. And from there is another obstacle. When you have all of that, you need to understand the stakeholders. Who are your potential allies? Who are the people that maybe are going to be opposed to your reform? And how to deal with them? How to talk with them? Where to talk to them? When to talk to them? How to approach them? That's an art. And you learn that, as I said, in reality, when you are dealing with those kinds of reforms. And finally, which is for me one of the pillars of policy reform, is how to survive emotionally and psychologically from that experience. Because through the experience, from the design of the idea till dealing with stakeholders and so on, you're going to be under a lot of stress and anxiety. And people are going to try to destroy you. It doesn't matter if you want to be president or you want to be minister or you want to be the chief of an agency or of a leader of a small team in the local, federal, or state level. It doesn't matter. The commonality among all those positions is that you're going to suffer a lot. Because trying to make change, it makes that you're going to make people angry. A lot of people are benefiting for the fact that there is a status quo. And when you try to change, people are going to feel uncomfortable. And the first target that they're going to find to attack is you. And you're going to be through a very stressful process. So the idea of the last session is how to survive. some tips that I could give you and try and understand how to do that. Just to give you an idea, I lived for more than 5 years with 3 bodyguards, with guns, of course, 24/7. Even my little daughters, when they ask me, why Jose, which is one of my bodyguards, why he's holding a gun? 6-year-old. How can you explain to a little girl why she's always walking with 3 guys with guns? That's not easy, okay? But so we're gonna try to discuss that. So from there, what I'm gonna do, sorry, it's as I said, we discuss what reform and what public leadership is, then the idea, then the storytelling, as I said, then the rules of the game, the stakeholders, and finally, how to survive. So now we are ready to start the second session, and again, thank you very much for being here. The idea. The idea is your horse, of course. It's your purpose. And I am sure what happened to me, that before getting into government, I was developing several convictions and several ideas that I wanted to do in government. I am a very passionate person, and I know that you understand me because you are exactly the same. That's why you are here in this master class. So I'm sure that every single of you have some kind of idea of the things that you wanted to do, something that bothered you for so many years, and you say, this is so unfair, or this is so stupid, or this is so ineffective. And you have been thinking and thinking. Maybe it could be human rights, maybe it could be rights for minorities, or maybe industrial policy, or maybe education policy, or health. I don't know. But I'm sure that each of you has something that bothers you, and you wanted to make it happen. And that's why you get into the government. So the idea of this session is how to transform that idea that you have, that is a conviction really strong in your heart, and you want to transform it in a policy design, in a technical policy design that could be realistic in a way that you can make it reality. That's what we're going to do today. The first thing that I recommend you, of course, because I'm not teaching you, I am sharing with you my experiences where I believe it works. The first thing that I recommend to you is understanding that policy is first and politics is second. All right? So politics is about the fighting with everyone, but policy is your idea. It's the first idea that you have. So I recommend that always, before trying to fight with anyone or try to convince anyone, that you yourself have your idea very well settled. Okay? And here, the best way to understand this, it's battles. Is why armies go to battle? Why? Going to battle is politics. You're fighting. But armies always go to battle because there is a reason to go to battle. A principle leads to battle. There always be a reason for an army to go to battle. Reason is before battle. In the same way, policy leads to politics. And that order, that sequence is extremely important. And when I'm talking about principles to go to battle, it could be very different. For instance, we have the case of Leonidas, the king, the Spartan king, and the very famous Battle of Thermopylae. The 300 Spartans that fought with 500,000 of Persians. And that battle had a principle that Leonidas, the most important principle was to defend democracy and liberty in the sense of that age, of course. But the reason to go to battle was to give the Athens, the Greeks that were living in another city in Athens, to have time in order to organize themselves to resist the Persians. So Leonidas stopped the Persians for 2 days until he died with the 300, but the reason was to gain time, okay? But also we have other cases. For instance, William the Conqueror, that was invaded England for in 1066, and he went to England and he invaded England from France. He was the Duke of Normandy and established a new dynasty in England, and the reason was to try to honor their right to be the king of England. There was a reason about that, and there are also not very relevant reasons also, like the Battle of Agincourt, in which the English king Henry V invaded France and fought a battle in which more than 10,000 people died, only for what reason? Because he wanted to defend his personal honor. So you said the reasons could be different, could be relevant, could be not relevant, but the point that I'm going to make is that there is always a reason, always. That's why we need to be very aware that policy is always first. If you don't follow that sequence from the very beginning, your idea could be destined to failure. One of the things that we say when we are in government is that policy defines politics. The way that we do that is understanding that choosing first the right policy is the best way, and then you can accommodate politics accordingly. Design first your policy, and then you will have more clarity to accommodate the politics. And that is going to make more sense in the following slides. One of the things that we say all the time when we are in the government is that when you design policy, you can design a beautiful horse that it's incredible because you are the expert in public policy, right? So you decide your beautiful horse. But when the horse, your idea, go into politics, politics transform your horse. Why? Because people are going to try to negotiate with you. People are going to try to say, okay, I like your horse, but why not let's do this and do that? You need to make concessions in the process of fighting. And in the process of fighting, you make concessions, and then at the very end, your reform doesn't end up to be a horse, but ended up to be a camel, which is still cute, but it's different, right? So you need to understand this from the very beginning, that whatever great idea you have, or whatever excellent policy design you have, at the very end, is not going to be the same. Because you need to follow the process of negotiations and concessions to other people. So the idea, the strategic goal, is not your final and original idea to become a reality, but something similar. That should be your best expectations, because we live in democracies, or this masterclass, the framework is a democracy in which we respect the policy process, right? So why I am sharing this with you? Because there is a key point here. If you design a beautiful horse, you can end up with a cute camel, all right. But if you start designing a not very beautiful animal, in this case, a burro, then you are going to end up, of course, with a different kind of camel. That's why I'm saying that finally, the most important thing at the very beginning is policy. If you design your policy well, you are going to end up with something that is not exactly the same, but at least it's going to resemble some kind. That's why it's very important to design good policy from the very beginning. Let's talk about now the horse, which is your policy. And we're going to talk about the politics behind that for you to anticipate why it is important. If you control policy, you control the political agenda. And I'm going to explain that. If you go with an idea, if you develop your idea and you transform your idea in a good policy design, and then you take that and you put it in the political arena, the discussion is going to be around your idea, not about other things. Everyone that is going to criticize or going to applaud your idea are going to be based on your idea, are not going to be based on something else. So if you have a very good policy design, you control the political idea. If you have an idea that is not very good and you put it into politics, it's so general that people are going to talk about everything and you will not have any degrees of freedom to manage the process, the political process. The best is your policy design, the best are your chances to influence and to change politics after that. How to choose the right policy? And that's the next step. You have your idea, okay? And you know that you need to develop your idea very well first, and then forget about politics for a minute and wait for that. The question is how to transform your idea, this idea that you have passion in doing that, in policy design. What is the process for you to be a sound thing? In my case, for instance, personally, what I wanted to do over the years is to change the way Peru progress. Peru is a country that for 200 years we have been living only based on natural resources. We produce minerals, we produce fishing products, we have, we have a lot of natural resources, and the most important source of income for my country has been based on natural resources. And if a country does that, it's prisoner of that. They don't have any power to control their future. If you don't have a diversified economy, you are very vulnerable to crisis. You are very vulnerable to declines in markets. So I wanted to change my country. I wanted to invest in science, to invest in technology, to try to create new things, to try to make our future that depends on our effort and not because we just discovered a mine. So that was my obsession over the years. But I needed to know how to transform that idea into a policy. And there is some sequence that I recommend you for you to do. So how to choose the right policy? The first question that we need to ask ourselves, only when we are alone, it's if the issue that we want to address, if the idea that we have, it's indeed a problem, or maybe it's not. And it's really interesting because there are many people that are frustrated for things that happen in our society, and they believe that they are a problem, when maybe it's not. So we're gonna discuss a little bit more about that. What do I mean when I say those things? Is it a problem? Let's see. Let's take the example of wage gaps based on technological change. We know that there are a gap in salaries between men and women all over the world. And people are very frustrated about that. I am frustrated about that. I teach several courses, and one of them is microeconomics. And I also ask a student to make a study about explaining with evidence why gender gaps in salaries exist. And the result is exactly the same. And I know because I know the research. Discrimination, indeed, the real discrimination explains very little, exists, but explain only a fraction of the whole gap in wages between males and females. And the reason is that there are other factors. For example, technological change that explain why there are differences in more skillful people and less skillful people in terms of gender because of the decisions that males and females take in terms, for instance, because of culture and because of the family. So there are other factors, and those factors are determined by things that we cannot control. In the case of income gaps, for instance, technological change is making a huge difference. While technology is advancing, the people who are more connected to those industries are gonna be exposed to a higher demand, and that's why their salaries are gonna be higher. But the industries that are not so connected with technological change, the people that work on those industries are going to have a demand that is not going to be strong enough. So that means that their salaries are going to keep the same or maybe less. So the gaps are going to start increasing because of technological change. And is that a problem? Well, it's very frustrating. But can we do something about it from the government? No, unfortunately. So that's one example of things that we figured it out that maybe could be a problem, when indeed are not, because we cannot address them. The other thing, as I anticipated, is the difference in salaries between men and female. And there are, as I said, many reasons why this happens. One is discrimination, of course, that we need to fight. But there are other factors that explain this gap, and we cannot do anything about it. As I said, decisions that we made, years of experience, and other kinds of things that has nothing to do with discrimination. And yes, it's frustrated, again, but we cannot do much about it if we don't target the specific reason of discrimination in order to deal with that. We have other cases, like for instance, hate speech. Hate speech is something that I'm sure that none of us will like that to happen. Absolutely. I don't like it. It frustrates me a lot. But we live in democracies, and democracies protect the freedom of speech. And even though we don't like it, if we have this idea of trying to change that, we're going to be faced to the wall, because our rule of law protects free of speech, including, unfortunately, hate of speech. So that's very little thing to do about it. We have other cases. Something that I'm really frustrated all over the years with is the social exclusion from clubs, associations. When you go to a club and people don't allow you to get in because of, because they have their particular standards to admit people or not. Well, this is really frustrating, but we cannot do anything about it, because this right is protected by most constitutions in democracies. And also we can mention other cases, like education, unfortunately. Education also is an area in which the state has rights to do things, but also there is some kind of space of freedom for parents to choose the schools of their children. And many of those schools impart values and principles that maybe we don't share. But there are freedoms that are protected by democracies. So my point, explaining this, my point is that, unfortunately, when we identify our frustration, we have two options. One is realizing that it's very frustrated that we cannot do anything about it. And the other option is that we realize there is a problem and I can do something about it. So the first level is that thinking, is my idea, is the idea that for social change, is it a problem that my system, a democracy, allows me to change? Is the first question that you need to ask to yourself. If you pass this first test and your answer is yes, I can change it, then you go to the next step, which is, should I do something about it? Which is really interesting, because there are cases in which there is a problem and should be addressed, but unfortunately you can do only very little to change it. And I'm going to try to explain here. So do something about it or not? Maybe not. And I'm going to be a little bit controversial here, but it's the things that I have seen and the things that I've listened from people that allow me to understand that there are sometimes policies that you can apply, and there are times in which the same policy is very difficult to apply because of the state of mind of people. One of the things that I wanted to share with you, it's one of my meetings with Gaston Acurio. Gaston Acurio is a celebrity in Peru. In Peru, we have the best food in the world, of course, and Gaston Acurio is our national chef. He's the most notorious, is a celebrity in Peru and in the world also, one of the best chefs in the world. And Gaston Acurio transformed the way of of cooking in Peru and enjoying food in Peru. One of the times that I talked to Gaston, we were talking about his success, about introducing in Peru dishes made with quinoa. Quinoa is a very traditional product that we consume even before the Spanish came to our lands. And Gaston Acurio was able to create dishes to make Peruvians to eat quinoa, because we were not accustomed to eat quinoa, which was really ridiculous, right? So he did it, and he changed our culture. And now you go to Peru, and every restaurant can offer you a different dish with quinoa. He made an excellent progress. But when we were talking, Gaston told me, you know, Julio, 5 years ago, I wanted to do the same thing, and I failed. What? Yes, 5 years ago, I wanted to do the same thing that I'm doing now, but I failed. Why? And he told me, he responded, because people were not ready. What do you mean? Yes, people were not ready for that transformation. It was too much to ask them. But now, after 5 years, in which Peruvians has been trying different things, the economy has been more open, the ideas, the new ideas, then Peruvians now were ready to that change. That's why they try, they like it, and now they do it. So it was interesting because I responded to Gaston, you know, Gaston, the same happened in policy. There are times in which you have a great policy, but people are not ready for different reasons. So you need to think about that. If your idea, maybe it's a good one, maybe it's something that the government could be involved, yes, but maybe people is not ready. Let's check some examples. One example is digital transformation. In Peru, like in the last 15 years, we had the government, not me, the government has been trying to make reform to try Peruvians to use digital mechanism for everything. Digital mechanism for paying, digital mechanism to register their personal information into the government, and digital information in order to do other kind of processes. For instance, like registering new political parties. And one of the things that happened, very specific, is that 15 years ago, the way political parties in Peru were registered formally to run for presidency was to get signatures from people. We needed a specific number of signatures from people on the streets, and we get those signatures to the authorities, and they say, okay, your party is registered, you can run. And we did that manually. We went to the streets with our papers and made people, okay, what is your name? You please sign here. And one by one, it was so tedious and was so stupid because we have now the technology. Why you're gonna do that? So the government thought something. Well, instead of giving papers, what we're gonna do is giving them, these people who are trying to register a political party, an iPad. And with the iPad, they go to the streets and say, what's your name? And all the information is there. And they only one click and say, okay, thank you very much. Very low cost, fastest, very efficient. Great idea, right? Well, it didn't work. It was a complete failure. Why? Because Peruvians were not ready. It was a lot of distrust. Peruvians believe they didn't trust in the government. And they believe that if they were doing that, maybe they were giving information to the government that they didn't want to. And maybe the government could use that information in order to harm them. So they were not ready. And after 15 years, now Peruvians are still trying to open to digital services because of that reason. So this is an example. When you have a great idea that is doable, that the government can intervene, but people are not ready. Other examples. Maybe people are not ready, but maybe there are not the priorities of people. Maybe your great idea, you talk to people and they are not interested because they have other necessities. For instance, this is Chincheros. This is a very beautiful place in Cusco, in Peru, where my family is from. And I had the opportunity to visit most of the places in Peru. Peru has 169 provinces, and I have been personally in 153. So I know my country very well, and I've been several times. So I've been talking and listening to people all over the country. And one of the things that I realized is that they have different priorities. When you go to the capital and you speak in the universities to the people who are, formally very well educated and everything, they are worried about other things. They are worried about the rights of minorities. They are worried about women's rights. They are worried about the environment. But when you go to these areas in the mountains and you talk and you listen to these people, these are not their priorities. Their priorities are, I need water. I need electricity. You know what? My son is sick and I cannot take him to a health center because there is no health center. Another thing, my husband died yesterday and I cannot have even the papers to register his death because there is no government office around here. Those are the kind of priorities that people have in those areas. And unfortunately, in the developing world, these communities are not the minority, are the majority of the people. So when you go with a speech that is your concern, but is not the concern of the people, your policy are going to be failed. The likelihood for the policy to fail is really high. Because one of the things that you need to have in your mind all the time is that if you have purpose and if you are passionate about the things that you want to do, you need to be sure that that purpose is relevant for the people that you want to help. If you want to do that because you believe on that, it's because you are thinking about yourself. If you have this great idea that you are frustrated and you want to do it and people is not interested, but you still wanted to do it, it's because you're going to do it because of yourself, not because of what people really need. So you need to have the capability of putting in the shows of the people that you want to benefit and you want to help and try to understand what they want and if this is important for them. So when you go to these areas and you start talking about progressist ideas, which I share, they don't resonate on them. And this is one of the reasons, just doing a parenthesis, why progressists, we don't win elections. We don't win elections in the developing world because our principles are more liked to things, as I said, the environment, minority rights, gender rights, and all these things that I support and I share. But these are not the priorities of most of the people who suffer from much more profound necessities. As I said, education, health, public services, basic services, starting by respect and dignity, of course, starting by that. So this is a thing that you need to have in mind. Your priorities and your great idea, it's aligned with the priorities of the people that you want to help, because if it is not, you're not going to have the support to make that happen, and you're not going to have the assurance that it is going to be effective and it's going to be relevant to improve their lives, not yours, their lives. There is another reason why maybe your idea that could involve the government maybe requires do little. Maybe it's because people don't trust. One example, which is really, really incredible, is the transformation of agriculture from the traditional way of doing it, like using water from rivers and just flooding the lands and using the water indiscriminately to farming, and the new technology that we have, in which is the drop by drop way of farming, in which you use this new technology that is really efficient. You use much lower levels of water. You are very efficient and it's very low cost. It is not so expensive. So this technique that has been developed for more than a couple of decades, of course, and now it's all over the developing world, a couple of decades ago was something really, really new for Latin America, particularly for Central America. So one of the examples of this that is really relevant is one effort that the World Bank wanted to do in Central America. They wanted to expand the use of this kind of technology. And they went to the farmers, and the farmers saw the technology, and the World Bank trying to make them use the technology, and nobody wanted to do it. I said, what? But it's straightforward. You know, you use this, I show you the levels of productivity that you could have, the new income that you could have. Why you don't do that? And nobody wanted to make that change. What was the reason? The reason is the following. These farmers are not rich people. They spend the budget that they have in using all the resources that they have in hand in order to farming. If they change the technology, the methodology, they are facing a huge risk because they don't know how it works. They don't know how the income is going to be. And if something goes bad, the whole thing, it's just, the whole way of living is just broken because they assume the risk of changing this. It was really hard. So even though you have a great idea, even though the design is perfect, even though the potential effects are amazing, maybe it's something that you cannot do because people are not willing to do it. Because people do not trust in that change. You need to do that change progressively. So do something, I don't know, maybe not. If you pass the second test, if you know first, the first test, that it is a problem and the government can intervene, great. You go to the second test, which is do something or not do something. If you pass the second test and you said, yes, people are ready, people can, people are going to benefit and they understand how to do that and there is potential for this, then you go to the third step, which is the great question is what to do about it if you have that idea. So we're going to go there in what to do. Sorry. And now that you are absolutely sure that your idea passed the test, and it's only an idea, okay? We are not talking about the policy design. Now we're going to get into policy design. Now is the time in which we're going to transform our big idea into something more technical that we can discuss further when we get into politics, of course. So your idea is your horse. That's your horse. And there are 4 things that I recommend you to check. The horse, I checked that in the internet, of course, before doing this because I wanted to make this metaphor and this comparison between the horse and policy. The horse has different important parts to live and to be successful. But there are 4 parts that a horse have that make them such a great animal. The first one is propulsion, is the hip. The back of the horse is extremely important because it gives propulsion. It gives the power of the animal to run and to move. So propulsion given by the hip is really important. The second one are the legs. The legs of the horse give the support but also the speed. They are so strong and so symmetric and so aligned that will give the speed and the support to run, help of course by the hip who gives the propulsion. The third important part of the horse is the neck. I didn't know that, but the neck gives the horse the balance because it's so big and the force it's so strong that of course the animal needs to have a balance or have a direction, and the neck provides that to the horse, the balance. And finally, the head, which is the sensing of direction, the sensing of the wind, the sensing of what's going on in the environment. That's really important, of course, for any animal. But this combined, these 4 characteristics give the horse this power as an animal. So we're going to use this metaphor in order to analyze the technicality of policy reform, how to transform your idea into policy design. So first, let's go to propulsion. What do I mean to propulsion? The first thing that you need to do, that I recommend you to do, is to use your idea and prove yourself that your idea makes sense in terms of the evidence. It's extremely important. The first thing, be sure that your idea is supported by evidence. And let's put some examples here. You don't want your idea to be based in only your values or your principles or your ideology or myths, or because you grew up as a kid and you had this idea that something it's correct or wrong. No, you don't want that, because if you do that, you're going to fail. Your idea is going to be destroyed very easily because it's not support in evidence. If your idea is support with evidence, it's going to be very difficult to be destroyed. When you have your idea that is supporting evidence, what is going to happen? Maybe it is something interesting, because your opponents are not going to attack your idea because it's so good, it's supported by data, by evidence. They're going to start attacking you. When your idea, one of the ways that you understand and you realize that your idea is so good is when you put it on the public and your opponents, instead of attacking your idea, start attacking you. That's one of the signals that you are going into the right track. So one of the examples of policies that needs a lot of data and information, it's migration, for instance. When you talk about migration to people in every part of the world, everywhere I go, I talk to migration, people in their mind said, first, migration, it's about humanitarian migration. That's the problem. It's about a human rights problem, and that's everything. And people who are, and people who are reacting to that. This is the first thing. And the other thing that you think is people in those conditions, they go to other countries because they want to be in those countries. It's their dream to be in those countries. They have been dreaming all their lives to move to their other country. And none of them is true. Indeed, it's incredible, but from 100% of all migration that happen in the world, only 10% is about humanitarian migration. The other 90% is migration about people who are moving for another country with different legal status, and they are increasing productivity, and they are studying, they are getting educated, they are working. So that's not true. The other thing that is not true is that migration goes from the poor countries to the rich countries. If you go to data, 80% of whole migration is not from developing countries to developed countries. It's from developing countries to other developing countries. Then migrants are invading the developing world, the developed world, and they are going there. What? Well, if you go to the rankings and you see what are the most important host countries in the world for migrants, they are not particularly the developed countries. There are many developing countries that are receiving a lot of migrants. So that's not entirely true. And finally, when migrants move from their own country to another country, it's because they don't want to do that. If you ask me, or you ask any person, where do you want to live? They're going to ask you, in my country. If they go to another country to search for a better life, they are doing it because they are forced, because they don't have options, because they want to survive with their families. So it's extremely important to have evidence and to talk about the things with authority. If you don't design your policy, for the first time you have propulsion in your policy, and you don't have a policy that is evidence-based, you're going to fail. It's something that you should keep in mind. There is another example. Another example is these policies in very poor areas on different parts of the world. I don't know if you learn about Hernando de Soto. Hernando de Soto is a Peruvian economist who proposed many, many years ago a formula to help the poor. And he said, well, what we need to do is only to give the poor titles over their houses, because they don't have titles over their houses, and they're going to create wealth based on that. How? Well, if I have the title, I have the title of my house, so I can go to a bank and I put it as a collateral, and the bank can give me money, loans, and with those loans, I can entrepreneur, I can make small businesses, and they grow up, and everything is going to be great because we have titles over our houses. So that policy, it's of course a fraud. That policy is not true, and there is no single document in the world that shows that that policy works. And one of the reasons is that Hernando de Soto is indeed a fraud. He's a guy who had one idea, they have no evidence at all, no data, but he has a very nice communicative skills in order to convince authorities in other parts of the world to do that when you have no evidence that that works. I know what doesn't work, and I know why that policy doesn't work, because I've been there in those places, and I've been talking to those people and asking why you don't use your title to go to the banks. And the response is the same, which is supported by other studies in other countries, which is poor people, they value their houses so much that they are not willing to risk their houses putting their title into the bank. Because what happens if the business that they are running with that money, it doesn't work, it's not going well, they're going to lose their houses. So they don't do that. So the culture, understanding the culture and the relationship between the families and their houses is very different in different parts of the world. The relationship that, for instance, in Latin America, families have with their house is very different of the difference that here in the United States people have with their houses. In Latin America means other things. There are other kind of attachments, psychological, generational, emotional, aside from the economic one. That's why these policies don't work. So this is another example in which you need evidence-based policies to convince people and to make these policies happening and have an effective result. There is another case that I want to share with you. This is San Juan del Lurigancho. San Juan del Lurigancho is one of the poorest areas in Lima, in Peru. And one of the things that the government wanted to do is to try to, in the pandemic particularly, to start creating centers to give people food, to make them to have breakfast and lunch and dinners and all these kind of things. And that was a good idea. If there's the pandemic, then the government go to these centers that are already established, and then they give them food, and the people organize, and they could eat with the help of the government. Good idea. Horrible data. Great idea, but no evidence base at all. And then I make with my team to develop this map, and I publicly said, the government is making a mistake. And this is the data. So I'm gonna show you. This is San Juan del Lurigancho, okay? The red area is the poor people. The poor people. That's the red area. The yellow area are the people who are not poor, who have become now low middle classes or middle classes. So the yellow area, non-poor. And the red area, poor. The blue points are the popular kitchens. The blue points are these spaces, little spaces in the neighborhoods in which is a community space in which people gather to do things. So are spaces in which they are prone and they are suitable to take food and to make the communities to cook for the government program. So why the government program was a complete failure? Well, because they took the food and they put it in those centers. And those centers, where they are located? Where poor people live? No, they are located where middle classes live. So why that happened? Well, that happened because 30 years ago, the yellow area was not middle class, was poor. So at that time, they built these community spaces in that area because they were the poor. But now, after 2 decades, of course, things change. And now, poor people live in other areas. So the government idea, great idea, congratulations. The implementation of the policy, horrible. No effect at all. People could not reach to those places. And I have several cases of this. So the first thing is be sure that your idea is supported by evidence. The second thing is try your idea not to be ideological. And this is something that we discuss in the disclaimer, that everything that I am sharing here with you are things that are not based in my ideology, in my political ideology, are based on the things that I believe work. There is a big difference, in my opinion, in ideology and the principles that you have. Ideology is a way of doing things. It's a very rigid, strict, square way of saying things should always be resolved in this way. For instance, things will always be resolved with government intervention. And there is another ideology that tells you, no, the same problems always should be resolved without government intervention. That's ideology that puts you in a corner, in a square way of looking at life, in a very simplistic way of understanding how people live and how the solutions can be, and that is going to hurt you. You just take ideology for another time. What I try to do all the time, even though I am a progressist by nature, but when I'm trying to do what I am in the government, is not to look at solutions that could be liked by the left or liked by the right and going to applaud me from it. No. What I try to look are solutions that solve the problem and makes people live better. That's my goal. My goal is not following ideology for the fact or following ideology. My goal is to do things to help people. That's my purpose. That's my passion, not following ideology. That's a recommendation that I give it to you. It's not going to be easy, but I'm going to explain to you, I'm going to share with you some examples to try to convince you or to try to make my case that make more sense to you. One of the cases is privatization. We have in many countries industries that are prone to these kinds of policies. For instance, we have electricity, we have mining, and we have water services. And when you ask people on the left, they're going to tell you, no, estatization. Estatization, these industries must be controlled by the government. And that's it. That's ideology. And when you go to the right and say, no, you need to privatize. Privatization is the best way of dealing with this. Government is inefficient. That's ideology. What you need to do, if you really want to help people, is to look at every specific case and decide if privatization is better or maybe estatization is better. And how it depends? It depends on many circumstances. It depends on how strong the state is, how good the technocracy is, what are the kind of beneficiaries that you want to help, what are the technicalities of the job that you are affecting. There are many variables that decide. Privatization and estatization is not an end. They are means. Privatization and estatization are means to achieve progress, not ends. If you get confused between means and ends, then you get into ideology. So remember that. This is one example. There are other examples. Centralization or decentralization. When I talk to people from the left, they tell me, of course, decentralization. 9 out of 10 people on the left, they're telling you that decentralization is always the way. And when you talk to people on the right, they say, no, decentralization. Why decentralization? Centralized. You need a strong state, really centralized, and everything is there. That's ideology. And why? Because your decision shouldn't be based on that. Your decision should be based on evidence. I'm going to put examples. If we have two kinds of policies, for instance, the infrastructure policy, the big projects, airports, ports, big highways, that's infrastructure policy. And then you have another kind of policy, which is agricultural policy, farming policy. In both cases, the justification for state intervention is really strong. It's very strong. You want the government to be involved on those, right? Yes. So is centralization better for one, for the second one, centralization, decentralization? Well, it depends. And it depends on the following. When you have industries in which the information, most of the information is concentrated on the top, then you need to choose for centralization. And what I mean when the information is on the top, if you are in the government and you are the president or you are in the ministry and you want to build ports and airports, you need to have a national perspective. You need to see your country geographically, and you need to decide strategically where your ports are going to be, where your airports are going to be, and where the big infrastructure are going to be located for the benefit of the country. You cannot give that decision to the local government. You cannot do that. Well, why? Because all the information to make that policy more effective is on the top, is on the strategic side. When you identify any single policy in which the information is on the top, then it's very likely that centralization is much better. But then you will have other industries like agriculture, in which the information is not on the top, the information is on the bottom. And why I'm saying that? Because agriculture is extremely different in every single part of the country. In one part, the conditions to farm some kind of products is very different than in other ones. The weather is different, the quality of the land is very different, the kind of technology that you can use is very different. So the conditions for farming and for agriculture are so different depending on the location that the information that is needed to make that policy successful is on the bottom, is not on the top. In that case, it's very likely that you will prefer decentralization instead of centralization. That's what I mean. This is the smart decision. This is what I'm saying. Don't be prisoner. Don't be captured by ideology. Just follow common sense and try to make things and to decide for the better of the people. Remind that you are not working for your ideology. You are working for the people. And that's what you want to do. Improve their lives. So the first thing is propulsion. If you have the propulsion and now you have your idea and you know that it's sound and you have the data, then you go to the support and the speed to get your policy go fast. Seek out and listen to the people. Well, I'm not talking about politics, huh? Please. I said that politics is after that. Seek out and listen to the people is about designing your policy. You are still in the process of transforming your policy, your idea into a nice policy. Seek out and listen to the people means that you need to test your ideas, talking to the people that you want to benefit and make sure that it makes sense to them. And also to get information from them that is not on the data. And that's another problem. When we are policymakers and policy designers, our schools of public policy tell us, oh, you need to face data, research, methodologies. But that's not enough. Indeed, that's a small part of policy design. What I'm saying, evidence-based and trying to look out and listen to the people, what I'm trying to say is that there are other factors that are very important in policy design that is information that you don't have access. And the only source of that information is the people who are in that industry, who are dealing with the problem, and that will tell you a lot of things that happen that you don't know and that will help you for your policy design. So let's take examples about that. This is very common in Peru, that I criticize every time in Peru, and I'm sure that happens in your countries all the time, that you have the authorities, the president or the prime minister or the ministers, that they receive visits from different parts of the country, and they get into their big tables, board tables, and they listen to the people that they are coming from different remote parts of the country to tell you what their frustration and their problems are. So they receive and they listen to them. This is the traditional way. When you do that, you learn very little, because they are trying to make their best effort to try to explain to you the needs and their frustration and their problem. What you need to do is to go there. Go there and listen the same things that they are telling you in the table. but listening in their environment, because you will understand 5 times more what is the problem in order to resolve it. So this is a case in which a community from Cusco visited one of the authorities in the government palace. And they visited because they have a problem. They wanted to share the benefits of making tourism in the Seven Colors mountain that is in Cusco. This in Peru is an amazing mountain. And they couldn't. And they couldn't benefit from tourism because there is another community that has not allowed them to go physically to those places. And that's against the law, of course. So they were very frustrated and they wanted the government help in order to resolve that problem. Of course, but if the authority who had made the decision to go there and to see and also understand what the problem is, well, the solution could be much better. So recommendation for you. Once you have your policy and you have your data and this strong evidence and base, go and listen and ask questions to the people that you want to help to improve your policy design. Because you're going to get information that nobody has. And you're going to have credibility and people are going to listen to you and they're going to believe in you because you're going to say, you know what, I have this evidence. But the problem with them is this, they cannot pass because there is a geographical issue here and it makes them feel, they make it more difficult to communicate and to transport. And how do you know that? Because I've been there. Very few people do that. So you could have a lot of power in terms of information to convince people and to gain authority when you do that. There are other examples. These are many people, many millions of people live in small mountains in the capital of Peru, in Lima. And they need a lot of things, and they live in these conditions. Many people, millions of people live in this condition. They start building their houses in high altitudes. And in order to get to their jobs, they need to get from the top on that of their houses to the bottom to take the bus and get to their jobs. And as can you imagine, they face a lot of risk. This guy, who is a young one, he's trying to go down. And you see how the street is? It's really narrow, and he can fall at any time. Can you imagine what happened with children or with seniors that are trying to do that? Well, that's a problem. And one of the things that they need is to build railing supports across all these small streets for them to have some kind of security. How you are going to understand that? If you invite him to your office to tell you their problems, you need to go there to understand, to see, and to feel how they are risking their lives and how they are fearing for their lives every single day. If you understand that, your policy is going to be much better, sound. So, second, if you want speed in your policy, speed for people not oppose once you get into politics, to convince people, to gain authority and everything, seek out and listen to the people that you want to benefit because they're going to give you a lot of information that you don't have. Third, the balance. How to have balance on your policy? Well, when I mean balance is have always local and global perspective. There are people who are saying, well, what you need to do is, if you have a problem, you go to the world and see what solution has been working and applying to your country, and that's the solution. I believe wrong. And there are other options that said, no, don't trust. Solutions are always contextualized. You need policies that are very well fitted to the problem, to the local problem, because that's the only way. I believe wrong. What I believe that works, at least what I have seen, is when you combine both. When you are aware that solutions, yes, are contextualized, but you can learn something from what happened around the world. Because I'm sure that maybe similar problems has been appearing in other countries, and there were authorities that found some kind of solution. So having this balance between be aware that your people are very different than the rest of the world, but at the same time, there could be ways that you can take advantage of things that has been done in the past is very helpful. Examples of that. Examples of that. It's this is I was in South Korea. Um, I was running for president, and as I said, one of the things that I wanted to do is industrial policy, is to transform my country from selling copper to selling value-added goods and services. So I tried to understand how developed countries were doing this. And I visited Taiwan, I visited Japan, I visited South Korea to understand. This is South Korea, in which I went to a complex in which they give money to young people to try to develop new products. It's amazing, it's amazing. They have a big complex, and they give money for 5 years to young people just graduated from college, and they pay in salaries and say, you know what, I'm gonna come back in 5 years. I'm gonna come back in 5 years and see what you discover. And that's the way the economy start creating new things. In this case, these guys were creating fake snow. And they say, what, fake snow? Yes, and how are you gonna use fake snow? Well, there are many applications. There are a lot of malls that for Christmas, they are using this. There is, and they cannot do that. There is no replacement for the natural one. So this could have a very nice commercial value. And I touch and this is it's fake snow, but it looks like snow. It feels like snow. It was incredible. So the thing is, I went out and I saw the world, what they were doing, and trying to see what elements I can apply locally in the case of Peru. There is another case of education policy in Colombia. In the Andes, we have a problem with education, and is that our children are very dispersed. Many of them are in cities, but many of them live in the mountains. So how you're gonna get to them? If you put a school and you create a school in the middle of the mountains, kids, in the case of Peru, it takes around 2 days to get to their schools. I'm not kidding. I've been there. It's not a joke. Yes. So kids, in order to start a school at Monday, they need to leave in Saturday. And in order to get to Saturday to their home, they need to leave the school on Thursday, right? So it's really weird. And professors were exactly the same. So what happened is that you have weeks of teaching instead of being 5, it's 1 or 2 days. So that's very problematic. So in the case of Colombia, they developed this policy, which is teachers go to the houses of the children. If you have a lot of children that live very dispersed, so you have a group of teachers that they are mobilizing and they are going house by house and trying to teach kids without taking them out of their own houses. This is costly? Yes, it's costly, but it's effective. And we try to do something similar in Peru. We're trying to see if this idea works. That's another example of how to see how other countries are doing to improve different kind of policies. And this is another example of trying to make global and think global and local. This is a community that lived very, very far away in the Amazon. In order to get to them, I went to the closest city, and I needed to take a boat, a small boat, it's like maybe 10 feet large, for 6 hours. A boat, we were 8 people, because you can have no more than that. 6 hours from the closest city in boat to get to this community, which is 1,000 people. Very, very far away. And this community, it was incredible how their priorities are. When I got there, I was so ignorant that I thought that, okay, what they wanted, they're gonna ask me is they want more jobs, or maybe they want, a health center, or maybe they want a new school. So I was like, I wanted to know what they want, but I had this idea, this elite ideas of what I believe people wanted. So I met with the authorities there, and we were walking in their site. It was beautiful, of course. And I asked him, what do you really want? And he was the authority. He told me, come with me, Mr. Guzman. And he took me to a very small river. Indeed, it was not even a river. It was something like a stream, okay? But it was like maybe like 5 feet a stream of water. And he asked me, the most important thing that my community wants is a small bridge in this stream. I said, what? Yes, that's the priority of my community, to build this bridge in this 5-foot stream of water. And I said, why? Well, the reason is simple, Mr. Guzman, because the school for our children is on the other side. And every single morning, in order to get to our school, our children needs to leave here at 3 a.m. 3 a.m. in the morning to get to the closest school. And because there is no bridge, they need to walk through this stream and they get sick all the time. When they go and when they return. And that's a problem for us. That's the big problem for us. And that's incredible. So you see how people have different necessities, they have different perspectives, and a qualitative change in their life could be so important for them. So put yourself in the shoes of other people and try to think like them, because if you do that, you can help them a lot. And this is one of the ways, for instance, to understand the local, and not the global, but the local, how they can improve. All right, so we're gonna then go to head and then receiving some questions, but then it's more, so, and get more interesting even. So the last one is, after you have your policy that is based on data, that is non-ideological, that is based on your values, principles, and what you do want to help, then you have reinforced your policy design and you have gone to the people that you want to help to listen, to give you more information, to increase your credibility. And then when you have that, then you go to the local and the global. What other countries in the world has been doing? Maybe there are some ideas that I can apply in a contextualized setting and all of that. Then you go to the last step when you have all of that, which is be humble. And be humble in many senses, but one of the senses, look for people who are smarter than you. Look for people who knows more than you, and that could help you to put like the strawberry above the chocolate cake, with this the state-of-the-art expertise or knowledge that could help you to make that policy sound. And why this requires to be humble? This requires to be humble because there is a problem with people who are trained, who are very well educated and are trained in policy making, is that over the years we start believing that we know everything and we are the experts and knowledge is the most important thing, and we start becoming arrogant with those kinds of things. And arrogance is the path of failure, not only professional failure but personal failure. So don't do that, because doing policy making is far, far, far beyond any technical knowledge that you could have. But reaching to people that know more than you in the area that you want to help is extremely helpful. And also it will give you security, personal security. And why? Because if you do all of those things and you are sure, and then you go to smart people who are going to fit this policy, you're going to say, if these people who knows more than I, they give me all these tools and I have that, well, it should be the best proposal, right? So it will give you more personal security and more assurance that everything it's going well. So that's the Hensing. So that's the 4 phases of designing sound policies. First, again, you have your idea, but you need to pass the tests, who are really hard. As we already said, it's is it a problem? Maybe not, maybe yes. If your response is yes, then you go to the following. It's, should I do something? There are many cases in which no, you cannot do many things, but there are cases yes. If your answer is yes, then you go to the 3rd step, which is how to do it. And then you start following these phases, and you consider in these phases for policy design. But this is just the transformation of your right policy. So first, remember this: policy first, politics second. First is the purpose, and then is the battle. Armies and generals, the first thing that they do before assembling their army, it's to be convinced that the battle has a justification, which is their idea, which is their purpose. And along your life, if you particularly get into government and politics, I know that many of you want to get into politics, and I will be really happy of trying to help you with the things that I have seen and the things that I have experienced, bad and good. But I know that many of you wanted to do that. And I'm telling you something. There are many, many people that are good politicians, but they don't know what they are talking about. And you know that. There are so many politicians that they are skillful in the ways of communicating, in the ways of being charismatic, but they don't know what they are talking about when they are talking of their ideas. And this is shameful and it's irresponsible because it's telling you what their real purpose are. If a politician has a very good purpose to help people, they should be knowing what they are talking about, because it's really unresponsible to be talking about something that you don't know. So if you are a good policymaker, the chances that you could be better politicians are higher, because you will have that knowledge and that credibility. And as I said, it will give you this personal security. When you have all these things, and then I said, I'm prepared, I have my army, everything is ready, let's go to battle, you go secure. Because as any general, you have a strategy, you have plan B, you have all your army that is well settled, you understand the land and the geography, you know the enemy, you know whether, so you are prepared, you are ready to start fight, right? That gives you security, personal security. When you go to fight and you decide to go to the public, then you are, I know, because I did my homework. I know what I'm doing. I know what I talk about. So that's important. So that is how to design policy, or at least how I learned to design policy. Do you believe that I follow these steps like that, like as a manual, when I get to the government and I start industrial policy, one of the policies of the reform that I led? I didn't follow this manual because I didn't know. I learned in the process. I learned in the process of, okay, this. And then when I start doing another policies, they start applying those experiences. But still, it's a process. Now, after many years, I believe that this is the process, that this is the right process. But it's not something that I did from the very beginning, because you start experiencing. So before giving the space for questions in the last part of this second session, I'm going to just tell you what is going to happen next in the next session. Is that you are who you are a public leader, you want to make reform, you have an idea, and you did your homework, and you did a policy design, a great policy design. Well, good news, good for you. You did your job. Bad news, it's not enough, because you need to translate, you need to be a translator. Translate everything that you did to design your policy into a story that people could understand, that even a 5-year-old children could understand, because you need to convince people in different areas, in the academia, in the business world, in the government. You need to build, and in order to that, you need help. You need to create a communication strategy. So the next session, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about why communication is important in terms of we human beings, how to craft narratives in policy reform, what are the problems of that and the opportunities, and finally, I'm going to share with you 3 or 4 different stories that we created to push policy reform in Peru. So we're going to stop here and dedicate the rest of the session for questions and reactions.
Thank you, Julio. This was a fantastic session. Before we address questions, I just want to acknowledge that we are approaching the 90-minute mark. So for folks that might have to drop, thank you so much for joining and sharing your thoughts and questions. I saw that there was a bit of discussion in the chat. All sessions, again, will be available on our masterclass webpage, so you can catch up with anything that you miss. And then if that's all right, I think we can go straight into questions, Julio. I know you're at the 90-minute mark, but as long as it's good for you, we can dive right
Yes.
in. Okay.
Yeah, please. How we're gonna do that? You're gonna mention. You're gonna read the questions, right?
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
great. Please go ahead.
So before we take live questions, we received several pre-submitted questions from participants ahead of today's session. So I don't think Nanaya is online right now from Car Development Foundation, so I can read her question out. She asks, in practical terms, how can we identify public problems such as limited sexual and reproductive health rights, access, and the barriers women and persons with disabilities face in agriculture, and then design solutions that are both rooted in evidence and realistic within existing political and social contexts?
Well, thank you for the question. I think the question fits very well what we have been reviewing, and I'm very glad about that because my answer will be trying to be sure that these steps in policy design are met, and from the very beginning, even to see if there is a problem or not. Of course, in this case, there is a problem. And of course, there is a government justification for doing that. I think in the proposal, that is included in the question has to do more with the process rather than to pass the first and the second test. So yes, my recommendation was to follow the process that we already discussed.
Perfect. The second question was also submitted anonymously. It reads, my organization is not registered as a lobbying or policy organization. However, we would like to participate in policy change. How can we do so without getting into trouble?
My personal question, I think that's not possible. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. I've been leading policy reform within the government, but at the same time, as you know, I've been a policymaker outside the government. I've been advisor of governments. I've been in the corporate advising governments. I've been a politician. So I've been in different positions. And believe me, if you want to make change, you're not going to get out of trouble for the simple reason because change means make people uncomfortable. And not only people who want to oppose because they are corrupt or they are interested, no. They are very nice people and good people that they want change, but they don't want to sacrifice anything for that change. It's one of the contradictions that we human beings have. That's why they follow leaders and they want leaders to make that change because they're not able to. So it doesn't matter if you are in government. It doesn't matter if you are in advising in a non-profit or civil society. You're gonna get into trouble, and I don't want to lie to you. One of the problems that I believe is that schools of public policy, sometimes I feel that they reinforce this idea that everything is gonna be fine, you know, you're gonna do great, and and they don't go to see, you know, to their real story, the real life side of making policy. You are getting into trouble, um, and not only into trouble of leading the process, but personally, you're gonna get affected. That's why, what is the cushion to do that? What is the force that you are gonna create in yourself to face that problem is your purpose. If you have purpose and you really believe, it's gonna be much easier for you to confront trouble. But responding your question, I have not seen through my life any intent of making social justice without getting into trouble.
Great. Thank you so much. And then we also have a question from Lorado. I don't believe they're online from the Johannesburg Crisis Alliance, but they asked us to read it on their behalf. The question posed is, how can we best mitigate the implementation of policies that may cause harm to a country, either in disguise or in the future?
Could you repeat the
Sure.
question again,
Yeah,
please?
of course. It's how can we best mitigate the implementation of policies that may cause harm to a country, either in disguise or in the future?
Well, I don't, well, the best way to get to this idea is the following. We could design the best policy, and we can do everything that it's needed to do according to my experience, and that will reduce the probability of creating collateral negative effects. Of course, because we have done our job and we are trying to do our best. But honestly, we don't know what is going to happen at the very end. We really don't know. It's doing policy reform is not starting, finishing, and then thank you very much, and you go out. Doing policy reform, it's a permanent monitoring process in order to understand the process, to evaluate the process, and to make the necessary changes in order for those collateral negative effects that could happen in the future, reduce the likelihood to happen. So that's the idea. It's learning by doing. There's not a perfect recipe and you make a great dish and that's it. No, you need to look, observe, evaluate all the time to make that happen. I can make some examples about that. One is the cash transfer programs. In Latin America, 20 years ago, we created, and this was created in Latin America, it was created in Mexico. And this program was saying, how can we help the poor in an effective way? Well, they said, we're going to give them money, cash, to the poor families, but with some conditions. And the conditions are going to be like they take their children to a school, and they're going to take the children one per month to the health center. And we have registration. So if the families do that every single month, the next month, we give them cash transfers. So it was a very smart way of helping the poor, but at the same time creating social assets, right? Increasing productivity over time. Great. Many countries in Latin America apply these programs. But the intention was great, and the design, they follow everything. But there was a problem. And the problem was that the money at the very beginning was given to the households that were men. Because there was the part of the culture and everything, they were the money to the men. And then when they were evaluating the program, they realized that the men were spending the money in different ways that the women were spending the money. So they realized, according to evidence, that women prioritize in their spending things for the family, for the household. And men, you can imagine, they were prioritizing other things. So what it was learned through the process is that it was much better to target the woman in the household for them to organize and to have them money. So this is something that you didn't anticipate it from the very beginning, but you learn when you monitor and when you evaluate, and you could make the adjustment in the process to avoid the harmful negative effects in the future, as the participant mentioned.
Definitely. Thank you. I think now we actually will take a few live questions from the audience. We received a few from the Q&A. I'll start just by inviting those participants to raise their questions directly. So if you'd like to do so, you can please raise your hand and we'll enable your microphone. I see that Gadaya, your hand is raised, so bear with us as we invite you to speak. Then you can ask your question here. Gadaya, can you hear us? Your hand is still raised. All right, well, let us know in the chat if you are having any technical difficulties and we'll circle back to you. But we do have a question from Mbato. Mbato, would you like to go off mute and ask your question?
context to the conversation, the example you gave around the gender wage gaps and influenced by tech change and the limitation for policy change around that. So I was asking, just to make it a bit more nuanced with context to greater majority countries. Is it not possible to make regulatory protections or advocate for regulatory protections on a constitutional level, maybe upon its review or push for its amendment, so that maybe we can focus on maybe the root causes of what's driving that discrimination specifically, and enhance protection from a more holistic level than necessarily see some of the symptomatic outcomes, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. First, in terms for these gaps in salaries has not only one, but has many factors in terms of evidence. I'm saying in terms of research. One of them is technological change, as I already said, and I explain why this is happening. So instead of making regulations for doing something with technological change, the best policy to do that is education policy, is to improve opportunities and improve the talents and the skills of people to get engaged in industries that have more added value. That's one thing. The other thing is to try to use technology in traditional sectors. If you have countries that rely mostly on agriculture, instead of moving the people from agriculture to software activities, just to try to apply the highest technological advances in agriculture. So that will increase the productivity, and that will make these technological based gaps much. So there are many ways in which measures to solve the problem could come from different kinds of policies. In terms of discrimination, for instance, one of the biggest factors, according to research, about this gaps in female-male salaries is years of experience. And why? Well, because we're human beings, we're Homo sapiens sapiens, and in our species, the woman is the one who gave birth, and the woman is who spends more time with the baby. If that happens, of course, women will have less time to be in the job market, but not for discrimination. It's just for the kind of biological task that we have, males and females, in taking care of the children, particularly at the very beginning from that. So one of the policies, instead of regulating, instead of doing something in the constitution or something like that, because it's going to be very difficult, as I said, it doesn't go to the problem, is to give complementary services that has nothing to do with discrimination, that will help women to have more years on the job market and have more experience. One example of doing that is the children care centers. That we in Peru, we have a very good tradition in order to do that. Why? Because in the vulnerable areas of Lima, which millions of households live, poor households in these small mountains, as I said, almost 80% of all households, 80% are led by women. 80% of the households are led by single moms, and they need to work, and they have children. So one of the things that Peruvians were doing, so with some kind of success, was to creating these care centers for children in their localities, a lot. And they were hiring people, the government was hiring people to make this center to take their children where their women were working. So that's one policy that is really effective, because you are not dealing with discrimination here. You are dealing with a reality. And the reality is that women take care of the household in many developing countries, and they need to take care of the children at the same time working. How can we expand their opportunities in working with taking care of the children? So that's something that the government can do. That policy, I believe, is more effective than making any other kind of regulations that will, be opposed to maybe other kinds of laws.
Great. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Julia.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Mbato. All right, and then we have also two more anonymous questions. The first one reads, what if I have a policy for something that is not yet a community priority? How do I get in from communities in order to get this agenda on the priority list?
Well, that's a very good question. That's a very good question. I'm gonna make a difference. I would like to make a difference between problems that are not a priority for people and problems that are a priority for them, but they don't know yet. And the first case in which they are not a priority, they are important for them, but not a priority, is the example that I gave for these communities in which they are more interested in public services and things like that. But there are other cases that I'm going to share in the storytelling in which there is a problem, but people feel it, and people know that the problem, but they never name the problem. So it was not like for access to them. In those cases, what you need to do is to reveal to them the problem. And with the example, it's going to make more sense to you. One of the problems, the big problems in Peru, is the trámites, is the red tape. Everything is difficult. Everything. You go to make any process to get personal information, it's a nightmare. It will take you like days to take a document about your life that should take minutes if you go to online. So people make lines, traveling, take the bus, driving to get to these government centers to make their procedures there. It's a nightmare. You spend a lot of time. But what happened? Over time, people get accustomed. People get accustomed because it's part of our life doing that, okay? So is it a problem? Yes. They feel the problem? Yes. It's horrible for them? Yes. But nobody named the problem. Nobody told them, you know what? You are doing this and you are facing this, and that's horrible, right? Yes. Well, the problem with that is this policy. Do you agree? And they say, yes, thank you. That's the second option. And that's something that you can do. That may be something that they are not talking, that they are not expressing, but the problem is there. So you need to reveal it. In the case of Peru, we did that in a reform that we're going to talk next session in the storytelling, that we talked to people and we said, you know what? Life in Peru is really difficult because every time you need to make these lines and people say, you're right. Yeah, life in Peru is very difficult and it shouldn't be. Life in Peru should be easier if you start doing, and people say, you are right. And how can we do that? And you say, well, there is a way that is called e-government. What is e-government? Well, I'm going to explain to you. You use the internet and you just put your information, and because the government has concentrated all the data in one place, you can do that. Now, the data, your data, is in 20 different agencies. So that's why you need to make lines. But if I put all the agencies in one place and share the data, you don't need to make lines. You don't need to go online and take it that because all the information is there. That's amazing. That's possible? Yes, of course it's possible. That's the second option. In which the problem is there, they know the problem exists, but they have not named the problem. And you reveal the thing. The third option is going from scratch. It's something that you believe is important for them. They have not seen that a priority. And my opinion is that that takes a lot of effort. That takes a lot of time because you are trying to change culture. You are trying to change human behavior on not one person, but a whole community from zero. And the likelihood for your effort to survive exists, but it's pretty low. So that's why if you really want to make change, go for, people in this world have so many problems that I believe a good way of doing it is go for the obvious ones. Go for the obvious ones. There are so many problems that go for the ones that you know that you can make change with effort, of course, but it's not going to be so challenging and so complicated because as we are going to see in the future of the sessions, you cannot do this alone. When we talk about the stakeholder session, I will tell you that it's impossible to make policy reform you alone. You need other things, and we're going to discuss how to get those things.
Thank you so much, Julio. I know Gadia would like to ask you a question, so I'm just gonna prompt him and move him over to speak. Gadia, if you can unmute yourself, you can go ahead and ask.
Yeah, good afternoon from Nigeria. Can you hear me, Natida?
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the moderation, and many thanks to Julio, for the insightful session. I've learned a lot, from the last session even today. My name is Haruna Gudia. I work with Leap Africa in Nigeria. I work between the intersection of programs and policy, and I'm always excited about governance and public policy. You've shared a lot about reforms, about revolution, about politics, about policies. In Nigeria, we have a peculiar challenge, even though the first assumption is that we believe that there are good policies, just implementation is the challenge. But in my research, I get to find out that beyond just implementation, sometimes some policies are actually bad. They are not well crafted, or they don't meet the need of the people. So my question is around storytelling. Nigeria is a pluralistic state with competing values, religion, ethnicity, and the likes. I just wanted to share more light, or your expert view on how we can actually conduct good storytelling for our public policy or policy recommendations, so that it can be well accepted among the people. I know that in Nigeria we have religion, we have cultures, and you can leverage different mechanisms. But looking at it from an outsider view, because I live in Nigeria, I work in Nigeria, I just had one opportunity to even step out of Nigeria just for like a week or so. So didn't have time to actually study the cultures or even understand government outside of the books I've read. So from your perspective, as a global scholar, what would you suggest are the key things we pay attention to when we are actually engaging in storytelling for public policy adoption? I don't know if that makes sense to you. Thank you.
Yeah, Haruna, thank you very much, and thank you for sharing what's going on in your country. My experience, of course, is what I have seen mostly in Peru, but I'm very glad that some things resonated, and the things that you have said resonated a lot to me, because when you were talking about, I said, that's very similar to the problems that I saw in Peru. The storytelling, it's incredibly important, and unfortunately, again, when we are trained academically, they don't tell us these things. Indeed, my personal opinion is that experts and policymakers underestimate these things and said communication, storytelling, yeah, that's for kids. That's for, it's not serious stuff. This is not professional, What is professional is the knowledge or the data, the research, and they're completely arrogant and they're completely wrong. And I am telling you that as an economist and as a policymaker that has been trained in policymaking. So I know that's the word. And they think that's arrogance, and they are completely misunderstanding of the real world. People are moved by emotions, and we're going to show that in storytelling. I'm going to explain how, according to biology, how we react by emotions, not to reason. And if we want to influence and change human behavior, we need to tell them stories, effective stories. And that's why from the very beginning I said that the approach that I wanted to share with you is a multidisciplinary approach. To make a social change, we don't need only economics or policy making. We need history, we need anthropology, we need sociology, we need a lot of disciplines in order to do that. So I'm very glad that you put value on that, and I hope that we can enjoy together the next session that is going to talk about storytelling.
Thank you so much for your questions. I think we might be able to take one more, Julio.
Yes.
This was submitted anonymously. It reads, you said change makers are troublemakers, but marginalized people often don't have the public acceptance to be good troublemakers making big changes, because a lot of times in politics, people are just trying to survive within the system. How do you think young, radicalized changemakers can continue to push boundaries within politics for the good?
That's a wonderful question. And I love the way you use radicalize, because you can use radical in different ways. And in popular knowledge, when you say, oh, he's radical or she's radical, it's like a negative connotation, connotation, right? But there are times in which being radical could be really positive. For instance, I'm really radical in make change for people to be better. I'm very radical. And if I need to do things in order for people to be better, of course, following the rules and everything, but I want to do it. And the purpose is for them to live better. Yes, and I am radical about that. So being radical, it depends how you use that word. So I'm very glad that you said it in the terms that you said it. And you are completely right when you say that the people who need it the most are the people who less voice has and less organized are. And we're going to talk this in stakeholders when we talk about the distribution of power and how power is related with policy making, and power is almost not everything, but almost everything for doing policy reform. But one of the sources of power is organization. When you have the capability of uniting small pieces of power, and you get it small pieces of power and make a moderate and a big piece of power. And that means two things, organization and mobilization. And one of the responses to your question is how we can make that. Is one of the things that is really important for us to make if we want to make policy reform is to help organize and mobilize the people that we want to help. And at that level, it could be different levels. You can help organize or mobilize small and medium entrepreneurs. You can help local producers of potato. Or also you can say, let's mobilize very vulnerable, poor people in the cities. There are different levels. But the way of doing that is, as I said, is organizing them. And this is not impossible. Indeed, we did that in Peru. And when we built our political party, we went from 10 people to 24,000 members of the party. We organized them, we mobilized them, and yes, so that's possible. But it's about organizing them and mobilizing them.
Great, thank you so much. I think that actually might be all that we have time for today. We're almost over the 30-minute mark, and we still have a good group of people engaged. So I just want to thank you for those who spent the last 2 hours with us. I think today was a really great session. I learned a lot, so I can only assume that everyone else did the same. Big thank you to Julio for leading today's session and discussion, and again for everyone for showing up. We hope you found the sessions insightful and engaging. Just a quick reminder, of course, the recording and materials will be available soon on our masterclass webpage, and we look forward to seeing you all next week for session 3. But until then, take care and have a wonderful week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.